Let's fix the Chiefs.
All right.
How are we going to fix the Chiefs? One game away from a three-peat. We got to fix the Chiefs. It's an interesting offseason. I've seen Chiefs fans discuss a lot about this is like the next phase of the Mahomes era here, right? We had the Tyreek Hill phase, we had the reset and the rebuild where they traded Tyreek Hill, got younger, put a lot of resources into the defense, and they won 2 championships out of that phase. And now it's the next reset here of the Chiefs era. They have several free agents on the defensive line. They've got some offensive line issues that certainly popped up in the Super Bowl. What's next here for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, it's funny. Like we did the Eagles, at the start of this, and it's like, how do you fix a team that just won a championship and looks like they have one of the best rosters in the NFL? Whereas the Chiefs, it's like they came up one game short, but actually, you look at this roster and like, this is not an easy needle to thread. They've got quite a few holes emerging on this roster. Like this is suddenly, it's nowhere near as good a situation, I think, as the Eagles going forward, even though, those were the 2 Super Bowl teams. You've got like key pieces on both sides of the ball hitting free agency, at least theoretically. Trey Smith, obviously a guard on the offensive side. Receivers like Marquise Brown, who never really got to feature much this season because of injury. Tershawn Wharton, rather, on the defensive line. Nick Bolton at linebacker. Justin Reed at safety. Like, there's some pretty key pieces of this team scheduled to hit free agency, and this is not a team that is swimming in cap space.
And they have 5 draft picks in Kansas City. So I think
5,
the left.
Let's 6, start. I think.
Oh man, I see 5. Misinformation everywhere.
It really is. It's amazing how difficult it is to hammer down like basic key facts about the draft. It's out there. It's nuts.
The PFF MDS has 5. Anthony
Tankathon has 6. They have Tennessee's draft pick in the 3rd round as well.
Anthony has him with 7 in our document here.
7?
Yeah.
They got somewhere between 5 and 7 draft picks.
Somewhere in there. Either way, let's start with left tackle. I mean, the history there of the last couple of years kind of going the veteran route. They had Donovan Smith, and we've talked a lot about how I think the offense, when you have the weak left tackle spot, that has coincided with their worst games, right? And off the top of your head, like Christmas Day against the Raiders a couple of years ago, and against the Browns this past year, where Mahomes had one of his worst games, and then the Super Bowl where, look, Joe Thuney's held up pretty well for a guard, but you had issues up front, right? So they've tried to draft there. They've tried to go the developmental tackle route. Wanye Morris in the 3rd, Kingsley Suamataia last year in the 2nd. Like those guys probably need opportunities just because they're invested pretty heavily in the draft to at least fit in somewhere. I saw Jeff Schwartz saying maybe Kingsley moves to guard, or they got to figure something out, a way to maybe maximize those guys. But either way, I think the left tackle spot needs to be solved this offseason.
Yeah, it does. But the question is, like, how do you want to attack that? I mean, do you go and try and invest? Like, the Chiefs are fascinating because the Super Bowl was really the first time since the last Super Bowl where they got wrecked by Tampa Bay on a major scale, where that kind of problem has surfaced again. The last time that happened to them, coming out of that Tampa Bay game, number one, it was basically an entire backup offensive line. So I think it made more sense. Like there was more of an explanation for it. And yet they still, like their reaction to that was spend huge on free agency, make Joe Thuney the best played guard in the NFL, was to like go big, investing in that offensive line to ensure that never happened again, only for it to happen again a few years later. But like, do they do the same thing? Like, are they going to have the same sort of intensity of reaction coming out of that game to ensure that left tackle is not that problem again? Or do they stay much more measured and say, look, that was bad. We just need to make sure we're not so bad at left tackle that kind of thing happens, and target, like, so instead of going and throwing the bag at Ronnie Stanley to try and make sure that left tackle is fixed, do we try and go lower level, bring in a Cam Robinson, say, at a lower level, or just spend less at that and try and fix it without going crazy?
Yeah, I think they at least have to discuss that. Now, the the Chiefs cap space is only around 15 million right now. That's with Mahomes right now scheduled to have a cap hit of $66 million this year, $68 million next year. Like that's going to get restructured, I think, this year. He's not going to take up 23% of the cap. I think they'll move money around. So I don't think they're completely hamstrung from a cap space perspective.
Right.
There was talk about a transition tag on Trey Smith, by the way. That's their spot at right guard. So when we're talking offensive line, I'll circle back to left tackle in a minute. Do they make it a point to try to keep that maybe the best interior in the NFL together? Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Do they at least try to keep that together for a little bit with a transition tag on Trey Smith? We know teams can match. It's not a true franchise tag necessarily. They can match offers, and we can just see if they could steal him for another year or two there. That's a possibility, but I do wonder how much they say, let's solve left tackle before we put all the money back into right guard, so to speak. And so,
I mean, I'd certainly be open to giving it a shot. I mean, we talked when we were fixing the Patriots. The Patriots have the kind of money and motivation to match an offer or make an offer rather to Trey Smith that the Chiefs can't match. So you can take a swing at it, right? Let's put the transition tag on it. Let's at least give ourselves a chance of keeping him. But I would imagine it won't be successful. Like it feels to me like a team can and should match the kind of offer that the Chiefs or beat an offer that the Chiefs can put out there.
So I think they have to go. They have to at least explore Ronnie Stanley and Cam Robinson. If Ronnie Stanley does hit the market, they have to at least explore that and say, okay, if we're going to invest the money, we're going to do it at, Creed Humphrey's going to get paid at center soon.
Yeah.
Joe Thuney at left guard. This is what's tricky, right? Tooney's already making a ton of money. Jawan Taylor at right tackle is already making a ton of money. Creed Humphrey's next. He's the best center in the NFL, and he's at 18. Can you pay a left tackle too? Can you pay four guys, basically 16 plus million per year? That's the challenge.
Well, this is why I think the Ronnie Stanley thing would be sort of a knee-jerk overreaction move, whereas the smarter thing would be to try and aim lower than that, but still upgrade the position. Like if you end up, I think Ronnie Stanley is going to get paid pretty healthily. This changes, obviously, if the market isn't there and it's softer than you think it is, and suddenly you can just be opportunistic about it the way the Bengals were with Orlando Brown. But like if Stanley's going to command pretty high-end tackle money, I don't know that you can afford to do that given what you've got already, given the holes that are emerging, given you're going to need to pay a Creed Humphrey going forward. I think you have to aim lower than that and try and fix it for a cheaper investment.
So where does that go? Who do you think?
I mean, I think Cam Robinson would be the guy I would be targeting from that potential group.
Man, Cam might get paid.
Maybe.
Cam, he might get paid the way the market is. Sorry, and I know Creed Humphrey, just to clarify in the chat, I know Creed Humphrey got paid last year. So I'm saying they already have the money in Creed, Thuney, and Jawan Taylor. And so it is tough to put a ton of money at left tackle, which is why they've tried to draft and develop. I mean, the other part is like, do you go Tyron Smith for a Band-Aid for a year?
But if
dealing with the injury concerns, whatever it might be.
So at the moment you have, 3/5 of your offensive line getting paid significant money. The fourth fifth is an upcoming free agent that you're talking about putting a transition tag on. And then the fifth is the one position that you need to fix, right? So you're either talking about making a financial commitment that makes the entire offensive line one of the best paid players in the league at their position, which is basically impossible to do financially. Like, in addition to, your quarterback is already getting paid significant money. Like you can't create a roster that way, or you have to at least determine which one of these are we not paying the big money to, right? Or both. So either Trey Smith is on his way out and the transition tag thing is a pipe dream, or you have to try and save some money with the left tackle upgrade that you're making, which I would say rules you out of Ronnie Stanley. Maybe it rules you out of Cam Robinson as well. And then you're kind of grasping around trying to find a left tackle that you think can start without breaking the bank.
And the reason why the Chiefs have gone this developmental tackle route the last few years is because of this, right? Because they haven't been able to invest heavily at that spot. If they go that path again, consensus board right now has Josh Connerly from Oregon at 30. Arante Ursary from Minnesota at 38, Cameron Williams from Texas, who's a right tackle, at 46. They could go back down that path. Wyatt Millum, who I thought might be a first rounder, but kind of struggled at the Senior Bowl, he's down at 66. They could go down that path again, but I don't think they want to play that game, right? I think this is an overcorrect type of year. But I don't know if they have the pieces to really do that and invest. You can't invest that much money maybe in 4/5 of the offensive line. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it's a pretty narrow needle to thread for the Chiefs now because they've got significant problems to try and fix without an overabundance of cash to make it happen. I mean, the Tyron Smith thing you mentioned, it would be an interesting attempt to fix it. The Jets did that, and then they drafted a replacement knowing that the chances are Tyron Smith is not playing the entire season, and that was true. I mean, that was borne out. He didn't make it through the season. So for a team like Kansas City, who expects to be in the AFC Championship game at a minimum, you have to budget in the idea of, okay, if Tyron Smith is the fix, he's not the fix for 20 games. He might be the fix for 15, but you don't know which 15, right? If the 5 you're without him are the weeks 17, 18, and the playoff run, that's a problem.
I might play that game, though. Try to get Tyron Smith for a year and still maybe draft somebody at 31, another developmental guy, and just go back to that same well that hasn't necessarily worked. But Sua Mataya, he's just a rookie. Like, we don't know if he's going to get better. So, but just keep adding resources. It's that important for them.
If you brought in Tyron Smith, knowing what we know about his chances of injury, would you even play him before November?
Sit him. Yeah, you sit him in like the middle of the year, give him a break, and then ramp him up for the playoffs and everything.
Like, genuinely play him like an NBA player's, load management or whatever they call that crap, right? Like, let's give Sua Mataya the first month of the season. Like, Sua Mataya plays left tackle for September, right? Then maybe once if that's going badly or whatever, then we get Tyron Smith. Like, let's just ease him into the season, right? Let's get him some October playing time, a little bit here or there, and then maybe Sua Mataya comes back in for November. And then once we hit December, then we start to ramp up Tyron Smith's playing time. We ease him in. Let's get him half the game. And then by weeks 16, 17, he's full-time starter. And then hopefully he can just survive for 6 games. And that's it.
That's what I'm doing. Let's go that route. The other part that needs to be attached, there's 3-ish starters, depending on where you have Deshaun Wharton, Nick Bolton, Justin Reed, all free agents on the defensive side of the ball, but it's really Charles Omenihu, Mike Pennell, Derek Nottie, like all those guys free agents. Defensive line needs an influx of talent here because they like to rotate a lot. They roll deep. They have all those different body types. That's been great for them the last couple of years. I think this definitely needs to get addressed this offseason.
Yeah, and because they're multiple, I would be intrigued in trying to keep one of Wharton or Omenihu. Omenihu might be a good kind of, I wonder what his market's going to be like, because I think he's a very good player, but he's missed like significant chunks of multiple seasons in the last couple of years. So that might artificially depress his value. And I wonder if you're the Chiefs, if you can be like, well, look, you didn't kind of give us what you were supposed to give us the last couple of years through no fault of your own, but like let's do this properly this time, right? Like we'll re-sign you, keep you in the building, and hopefully we'll get like actually full participation of Omenihu now.
I would love to get Omenihu back, and then I think all the defensive linemen in the late first. I know we were talking about maybe I think they're debating. I think it looks like a potential tackle or defensive lineman, right? And I think, look, I love Jack Sawyer as a player. He's currently 36th on the consensus board. I don't know what he's going to test like. I think that'll be a thing, but I think he's a fringe first round type. That would be good to get in the building there. Nick Scourton, where he ends up falling or landing as far as, for Texas A&M, I think expectations were that he was going to be closer to the top 10 coming into this year. He kind of disappointed a little bit. I think there will be value in the back end of the first round, like there is for a lot of teams on the defensive line here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, another team where it might make sense to try and hit both an edge rusher and an interior player with those first couple of picks.
Derek Harmon, too, by the way, currently 34 on the consensus board, the Oregon defensive tackle. I think he's got some issues in the run game, pad level type stuff, but he is a really good pass rusher. And if you pair him with Chris Jones, I mean, I think they can get back on track on the defensive line pretty quickly with some of these picks.
Yeah, and if you lose maybe one or both of Tershawn Wharton and Charles Omenihu. Omar Norman Lott, the Tennessee defensive lineman, is getting a ton of buzz and has a really impressive pass rushing profile. Again, maybe a one-dimensional guy as a pass rusher versus a run stuffer, but that fits that missing, like those snaps that are going out the door of Omenihu and Wharton theoretically could be replaced by a guy like Norman Lott.
I would also say the other positions, guard, Nick Bolton at linebacker, Justin Reed at safety. I mean, they're lower value positions, and I think you just kind of play that game, get the second, third wave of free agency, play the waiver wire. I think you could fill those spots fine. To me, this offseason has to be make sure the tackle spot gets solved, defensive line depth, and then the other thing to touch on is the receiving core with Marquise Brown was just in for the 1 year. DeAndre Hopkins is out. So you still have that nice nucleus of Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, but you have an aging Travis Kelce as well. Like, how do you make sure that the playmakers are staying in a pretty good spot moving forward?
That's key. And I think there's an overall sort of philosophy question about what this offense is going to be. I think that's why, people are talking about this as the next phase of this Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid thing that, you had the initial wildly explosive, wildly dangerous offense with Tyreek Hill and all these crazy playmakers. And then you had the let's pivot to more of a ball control type of offense. And then you had whatever last year was, which is like making do with the pieces that we have. Like the ones we thought we were going to have weren't really there. So now you've got, Xavier Worthy's there. Obviously, your former first-round pick, speedster. You've got Rashee Rice coming back next year off that incredible knee injury that he suffered. Pacheco should be healthy again. But Travis Kelce, looks like an aging shadow of himself. Who knows if he decides it's time to retire and walk away after that Super Bowl. Either way, you start needing to very much craft a new offense again, and figure out exactly what this is going to look like. So Worthy's a good piece. Rashee Rice should be a good piece if he comes back healthy. But that's, you still need that's a serious work in progress to still get to like the next iteration of this offense.
The late second round, there might be some good value there. The way this receiver board falls, Jalen Royals right now is currently at 64 in the consensus board. I know you're certainly higher on him. I like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. They're like in that range consensus board wise. I think there's probably good receiver value when the Chiefs pick in the second round. So I would keep an eye on that as a potential option just to add depth there. And Rashee Rice coming off the injury, just make sure you've got that position future-proofed. And then it is a good tight end year. It is a good year if we're talking, look into the future to replace Travis Kelce. Harold Fannin Jr., get him in there as the next pass-catching tight end for Patrick
Bowling
Mahomes.
Green's finest.
I think I could see it. All right, did we solve all of the Chiefs' many issues?
Mike Renner was tweeting the other day that he thinks tight end might be the strongest position group in this entire draft at a year or at a time where tight end has generally not been a strength of most drafts. Like finding tight ends has been a struggle for a while now, outside of some significant exceptions. So somebody mentioned Arroyo from Miami previously. You just mentioned Fannin from Bowling Green. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon would be an interesting one. He showed out at the Senior Bowl, making some nice plays. I think there's going to be a lot of options there. I think they should absolutely add one of those guys.
Yeah, I like Mason Taylor from LSU, Aronde Gadsden, the second. He's a wide receiver convert, wide receiver-ish type of body that we call a tight end. So there's a lot of those options in this draft. I think they'll at least be looking at tight end here.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.